I walked in expecting tea, maybe a quiet evening with my cinnamon candle burning and the soft hum of the fire waiting. But instead, I saw him standing by the hearth, holding my old journal in both hands like it was a piece of trash. I stopped, breathing before he spoke. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Nobody cares about your dusty memories," he said, without even looking at me. And then he dropped the pages into the fire like they were nothing more than old receipts. The sound was soft, like leaves brushing across a grave. I couldn't move. The fire snapped, crackled, glowed, but all I could feel was the cold in my chest. The warmth of the room mocked me. I remember thinking, so this is what it feels like when someone burns your past and doesn't flinch. I stood still, like something, glass that didn't want to shatter. He turned away, just like that, as if he hadn't lit a funeral for 30 years of me. And I stood there, surrounded by cinnamon-sweet air and betrayal thick enough to chew. The flames didn't leap. They whispered. My pages fell like feathers, too light to resist what waited for them. I didn't say a word. I didn't scream or snatch them back. I just watched them curl at the corners and turn black in slow spirals. You know how leaves look in October when they float down just before they're crushed? That's how they burned, softly, beautifully, tragically. I could see the page I wrote about my brother. I saw the one with the poem I never let anyone read. I remembered every stroke of ink, every sigh that filled the margins. And still, I couldn't move. I couldn't reach it. The smell was bitter, paper and leather, and something older than both, as if the fire had found the truth in them. I just stood there, breathing shallowly through the grief, watching the smoke steal the only place I'd ever told the truth out. Loud. Even through the crackle of flames, I could hear it, the sound of my pen scratching across paper from all those nights ago. The soft, steady rhythm that had once calmed me after a bad dream or a fight we never talked about. I remembered the way I used to write while he slept in the next room, his breathing deep and unaware. I wrote about my father's last Christmas, about the baby we lost, about the silence between us that stretched longer than any argument. I never told him what was in those pages, but they were mine. Every word a piece of me he never wanted to know. And now they are gone. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. My throat was tight, the kind of tight that makes you feel like you're being strangled from the inside. I looked at him, standing there with his arms crossed, his jaw already set like a verdict. The words were in my chest, loud, aching, angry, but they froze somewhere behind my teeth. I gripped the edge of the armrest, feeling the old fabric dig into my fingers. I wanted to say, "How dare you?" or maybe just "Why?" But instead, I sat still, swallowing every word like a stone. And in that silence, I felt myself getting smaller. The snow outside fell gently, but inside, I felt like I was unraveling. I walked to the window without thinking, my eyes catching the slow dance of flakes against the glass. I pressed my hand to the cold pane. It was soft, quiet, and peaceful out there, but I was melting inside, like ice held too long in a closed fist. That journal had held more than memories. It held every version of myself I didn't know how to speak aloud. Without it, I wasn't sure what was left. Just a warm room full of cold silence and a woman who didn't know how to grieve what she couldn't bury. After he left, I knelt by the fireplace. My knees ached, but I didn't care. I sifted through the ashes like I was looking for a heartbeat. And there it was, a single page, half burned, the edge still glowing faintly. I blew gently. My words, my handwriting, are still visible along the top. A line about my mother. A line I thought was gone. I folded it slowly, my fingers trembling, and tucked it into my palm like something sacred. I didn't cry. Not then. I just closed my hand around it, held it close to my chest, and whispered, "I'm still here." Because I was. maybe bruised, maybe quieter, but not gone, not yet. When the house finally fell quiet, that was when I came alive. I'd wait until the soft rhythm of his snores settled into the walls and the creak of the stairs no longer betrayed wandering feet. Then I'd climb up to the attic, my little world above the world, and open that drawer under the window. My notebook was always waiting, and so was the pen. I'd wrap my cardigan tighter, pull the lamp chain with a soft click, and start writing. I never wrote for an audience, never even reread much. The words just needed out. I wrote about my days, about the smell of my mother's cinnamon rolls, about the ache in my hips that wouldn't leave. Sometimes I'd get lost in it, like stirring sugar into tea, slow and quiet, something you don't rush. In those pages, I wasn't anyone's wife or mother or neighbor. I was just Evelyn, just me. And somehow, even if the words stayed tucked, in the drawer, that was enough. I kept recipe cards in an old wooden box, some with food stains, others with creases worn from my fingers. But not all of them were for cooking. Some were for grief. 1 part silence, 2 parts pretending you're fine. I'd write that after a funeral. Another said, hold your breath when the door slams. Exhale after the apologies. It looked like a dessert at first glance. The cards stayed tucked between real ones, as if hiding them made them safer. I'd pull them out when I felt like I was drowning, run my fingers over the ink, and remember that I'd survived once already. I can still feel the dust on the lid of that box, the way my hands carried the smell of cloves and flour even when I wasn't baking. Those recipes were never for anyone's table. They were how I fed the part of me no one ever asked about. It rained the day we found out he wouldn't be coming home. Not drizzle, real rain, the kind that soaks through your shoes and doesn't care if you're grieving. I sat in the attic that night, staring at a blank page. And then I wrote. Dear Billy, it started. The rest came like a flood. I told him I was sorry I hadn't answered his last letter. I told him the boots he left behind were still by the door. I told him about the casserole Mom burned while crying. And then I wrote one word, sorry. And that's when the tear landed, right on the ink. It spread like a bruise across the page. I folded the letter twice, then again, as if that would make it smaller, easier to bear. But some pain, no, matter how you fold it, still finds room to ache. That letter stayed on my desk, unread by the one who needed it most. Some evenings, the words poured out like rain tapping against the attic window. I didn't even need to think. My hand just moved. I'd write until my tea went cold and my ankles ached from sitting so still. And for those hours, I forgot. I forgot the way the silence at dinner stung, forgot the mailbox full of nothing, forgot the ache I carried in places I couldn't name. The page didn't ask questions. It didn't interrupt or offer suggestions. It just held the ink. Sometimes I'd stop and reread something, surprised by what I'd written. Not because it was profound, but because it was honest. In those moments, I didn't feel broken or lost. I felt human. And in a house where I was often only seen for what I could do, not who I was, that meant everything. He found one of the pages I left out. I must have been tired or careless, or maybe deep down, I wanted him to read it. He didn't say anything at first, just sat on the edge of the bed, eyes scanning each line slowly. Then he set the page down and said, "These make me feel small." I didn't know what to say. I thought stories were meant to open us, not shrink us. I remember blinking, waiting for more. But that was it. He got up and went to brush his teeth like we hadn't just shared something sacred. That night, I went back to the attic and wrote without his name. I didn't stop writing. I just stopped asking him to understand. And maybe that was the start of me keeping the pen for myself. I never set out to hide my writing. I didn't think of it as a secret. I just didn't think anyone would care. The attic became my sanctuary, a place where I could lay down bits and pieces of myself without interruption. A memory here, a question there. It was like patching a quilt, messy, honest, sometimes crooked, but warm in its own way. When I think back, I wonder if things would have been different if I'd read them aloud sooner. If I'd handed him a page and said, "This is me." But then again, maybe I wasn't ready to be seen. Maybe I needed those stories to grow in, the dark first. Now, when I see them on paper, I feel something close to peace. Not because they're perfect, but because they're mine, and I no longer need permission to call them worthy. The phone rang right as I was pouring syrup. It was one of those peaceful Sunday mornings, light streaming in through the lace curtains, bacon still sizzling, a soft hum of birds just outside. I thought it might be our daughter, maybe calling to say good morning. But when he picked up, his fingers hesitated just a second too long before he answered. "Mm-hmm," he said, voice tight. Yeah, that part about her mother's death. Do you think we should soften it?" My fork froze midair. My mother's death? I hadn't told anyone, not really, not the whole thing. I looked up slowly. His eyes darted away. The room felt suddenly too warm, like the sun coming through the window had turned cruel. He kept nodding, agreeing, the same way he used to nod when picking paint samples I'd already chosen. Like my grief, too, was something to be managed. I looked at my plate. The syrup had run past the pancakes and was pooling near the edge, almost dripping, just like my trust. He hung up and smiled like nothing had shifted. I wiped my hands on the napkin and whispered to myself, "They weren't your words to share." He kept talking about edits, timelines, excitement. His voice filled the room like steam off the coffee mugs. I kept buttering my toast because it was the only thing I could control. The butter spread smoothly, even as my hands shook. "I think they'll want a launch party," he said, chewing. "Some press, maybe. They like the emotional stuff. That part about your mom really got to them." I stared down at the plate. Just crumbs now. I wasn't hungry anymore. He didn't say we. He didn't say ours. Just they and me. My name wasn't even an afterthought. It was missing. Vanished. Like a side character in a story I'd written from my bones. The birds chirped outside like they didn't know better. My fingers tightened around my butter knife. I thought about all the women who had disappeared this way, slowly, politely, behind someone else's voice, and I felt it, the sting of becoming invisible in a room I had built. Later that day, he showed me the cover mock-up. "Look how clean it looks," he said, turning the laptop toward me. There it was, his name in bold, serif gold. No subtitles, no co-author, not even a mention in the acknowledgments. "It's just a technical thing," he said as I stared. I nodded, like that would help me swallow it, but my name, my real name, Evelyn May Taylor, didn't fit. Not on the cover, not on the page, not in his plan. I nodded again, quietly. And in that moment, I tasted how it feels when someone erases you with compliments and smiles. He poured more syrup onto his plate, smiling like he was about to offer me something sweet. "They wouldn't have taken it seriously if it came from you," he said. "You know how publishers are. Old woman writing about feelings? They'd laugh it off." I didn't answer. Just watched the butter melt on his pancakes, soft and slow, the way grief does when no one's watching. He took another bite. This way, we get the story out there and everyone wins. Everyone. I looked at him. When did it become easier? For him to believe a stranger than to believe in me? The coffee in my cup had turned cold. But I took a sip anyway. It tasted like everything else he'd served me lately. Sweet, then bitter. "I mean, if it's too much," he said, shrugging, "we can just cut the part about your mom's death." Cut it? It wasn't a sentence. It was a memory. A hospital room, a plastic chair, her hands too still. My goodbye that came too late. I blinked, once, twice. He tapped his fork against his plate, oblivious. "It's kind of heavy, right? might slow the reader down. My chest burned. That moment wasn't fiction. It was the last thing I ever told her. And now it was a footnote to be edited, softened, erased for pace. I looked out the window, watching. The neighbor mow the lawn, like the world hadn't just been reduced to marketing notes. I didn't answer him. I just folded my hands in my lap and stared at the sunlight crawling across the table like it didn't know what it was touching. Placed my palm flat on the lace tablecloth, feeling its threads beneath my fingers. Firm, textured, real. I didn't speak. Didn't argue. I didn't ask him to change his mind. I just sat with it. The truth that he had used my pain, my stories, and left my name behind because it didn't fit his narrative. He saw my words as useful, but not me, not my name. The syrup. Bottle sat in the center of the table, sticky with fingerprints. His, mine, maybe our grandson's from last Sunday. I stared at it. That messy little reminder of shared lives. Outside, the lilies swayed softly. I used to cut them fresh for the kitchen. Now they have bloomed without permission, just like me. And in that quiet moment, I stopped waiting for credit and started reclaiming what I never should have given away. I told her. I didn't shout or accuse, I just told the truth. That her father had signed the deal without me. That my name wasn't on a thing I'd written with my own hands. There was a long pause, and then her voice, sharp, practiced, cut right through the silence. "Don't make this about you, Mom." And just like that, the line went dead. I stared at the phone, blinking at the emptiness it left behind. I could still hear the faint hum of the dial tone. That phone used to bring pie recipes, plans, her laugh. Now it just sat there like something that had turned on me. I reached for my coffee, but it had gone cold. The blinds were half open, casting strips of light on the floor. I watched the dust floating in the beam. Funny what you notice when the air feels heavier. I stood there a while longer, hand on the counter, the silence spilling out of the hallway and filling the room. Maybe she needed to believe he was still, the man she thought he was. Maybe I had ruined something. But still, don't make this about you. It already was about me. It always has been. I just hadn't said it out loud until now. The messages kept coming. A turkey emoji, a blurry photo of a pecan pie. My niece complained about overcooked green beans, a meme about stretchy pants. I watched the thread light up, one bubble after another. I was still in the group, technically. No one had removed me, but not one person asked if I'd be coming. I told myself I didn't care. I told myself I'd rather stay home anyway, but my phone sat face up on the counter all afternoon, just in case. I refreshed the thread more times than I'd admit. The kitchen was quiet except for the refrigerator hum, and outside the sky had gone that dull winter gray. The kind that feels like it could snow or stay dry, you never know. The scent of rosemary from the oven was the only thing that made it feel like Thanksgiving. That, and the ache of being forgotten right in plain sight. I peeled the potatoes slowly, the way I always had, thumb pressed just right along the edge of the blade, the skins falling into the sink like paper curls. I didn't need to cook. I knew that. But my hands needed something to do. I filled the pot with cold water, added salt, and let the stove heat it up while I stood there, listening to nothing. No music, no chatter, no chairs scraping across the floor, just steam. When they were soft, enough, I drained them and started mashing. No one would taste them but me, but I added cream anyway. That's how he liked them. That soft, rich kind of texture you get when you use just a little too much. Habit, maybe. Or hope. Maybe both. I stirred in some garlic. Not because anyone asked for it, just because it made the kitchen smell like something was happening. The window fogged from the steam. I wiped a corner of it clean and looked outside, but there was nothing out there except the faint shadow of my own face. I kept stirring long after they were ready. I didn't need food. I needed to remember how it felt to be part of something. opened the cupboard, and took out the good plates, the ones with the little green ivy vines around the edges. They hadn't seen daylight since last Thanksgiving, 4 of them. I knew I didn't need that many, but my hands set them out anyway. One by one, like they always had, I unfolded the cloth napkins. My fingers shook more than usual. The corners were still sharp from storage, and dust clung to the china like it had claimed the space I used to fill. I didn't wipe them clean. It felt right somehow that even the dishes weren't expecting company. I placed the forks beside each plate, adjusted the glasses so they lined up just so. The table looked ready, but no one was coming. The kitchen had that amber glow it always got around dinner time, warm, a little golden. But instead of comfort, it made the room feel theatrical. Like I was staging a play no one would attend. I stood at the head of the table and looked at the places I'd set. Then I walked away. They were laughing. I could hear them through the wall. The neighbors. Someone clinked a glass. Someone else shouted, "Amen!" in a voice full of joy. I leaned gently against the wall, hand pressed flat against the paint. I imagined their faces, imagined the folding chairs, the little kids sneaking rolls. Before Grace, I didn't feel bitter, not really, just lonely. Sometimes borrowed joy is better than none. So I closed my eyes and listened like it was music. But then they started singing. A hymn. The one we used to sing before our Thanksgiving meal. The one that made my husband tear up, even if he pretended not to. My knees nearly gave out. I held the wall like it could hold me back, not from anger, not from hurt, just from missing being part of a circle. There's a kind of grief that only comes when the people you used to laugh with are laughing somewhere else, and you're the only one who notices. The wishbone was still in the sink, untouched. Usually, someone would rinse it off, let it dry, leave it on the windowsill so we could pull it the next morning. Little tug-of-war of hopes. But this year, no one touched it. Not even me. I stood at the sink with my hands in the dishwater and just stared at it. White, fragile, still whole. I picked it up, held it gently in my palm. It felt lighter than I remembered. Or maybe I just felt heavier. I thought about wishing, but I couldn't bring myself to snap it. There was no one across from me. No one laughed when it broke unevenly. No one to tell what I'd wished for. No one pretends not to guess. So I set it on the counter, and I left it there. Maybe that's the lesson this year. Sometimes you let go, not because you've stopped caring, but because you finally learned who never really did. The pie box was faded pink with a grease stain in one corner. It used to hold lemon meringue from the bakery down the road, but today it held something sweeter and far more fragile. My stories, not all polished, some smudged, some taped back. Together, every page trembling a little with me. I cradled that box like it had breath. As I stepped into the library, the sunlight poured through those wide windows, and the scent of lemon polish and dusty paper met me at the door. My hands were sweating. I felt like I was returning a borrowed treasure I'd never told anyone I took. It wasn't just paper inside, it was me. All the quiet parts I'd tucked away while raising kids, folding laundry, and trying not to vanish. And now I was handing it over to someone else. I held my breath, and I walked in. Joyce didn't greet me with noise or fuss, just a soft smile and the kind of silence that makes room for truth. I sat across from her in that little corner by the genealogy shelves. No one else was around. I set the box down gently, like it might fall apart if I wasn't careful. She didn't ask what it was. She didn't ask why now. She just opened the lid the way you'd unwrap an heirloom, slow, respectful. She took out the first page. Her glasses slid down her nose and she let them. Her eyes scanned the page, then stopped right at the third line. Her breath caught just slightly. And then she looked at me, not with judgment, not with questions, just seeing. And in that pause, something inside me eased. She read aloud, quietly, reverently, like she was holding something holy. I never expected the storm to begin on a Thursday. She stopped there. Her voice trembled. Not a lot, just enough. She pressed her lips together for a moment, like she needed to steady herself. And then she whispered, "This isn't just a story. It's a map." My throat closed up. A map? I hadn't thought of it that way. I just wrote what I remembered, where it hurt, where it healed, where I got lost. I didn't mean to lead anyone anywhere. But somehow Joyce had followed a trail. Didn't even know I'd left behind. She kept reading, softer now, as if each word might stir something too deep. Outside, a bird chirped once and then went quiet, like the world knew to hush itself. I folded my hands in my lap and stared at the cover page. I didn't know where this story was going, but for the first time, I started to believe it might be going somewhere. I didn't expect to cry. I'd read those words a dozen times, maybe more, but seeing Joyce's eyes shimmer, that did something to me. She didn't blink fast or apologize. She just let the tears sit there quietly, like they'd always been welcome. And that gave me permission. My tears came slower. They surprised me. One slipped down before I even realized I'd started. Then another. Joyce reached over and gently slid a tissue across the table without saying a word. I pressed it to my cheek. It wasn't sadness. Not exactly. It was the ache of being understood after so many years of being fine. I didn't need her to praise me. I just needed someone to feel it. And in that little corner of the library, I did. Joyce looked up, eyes still a little red, and asked softly, "May I hold on to this?" I stared at the box. My box. My instinct was to pull it back, but something stopped me. Her hands were open, not eager, not greedy, just kind. "Of course," I said, even though my fingers hesitated. She placed the stack of pages back into the box so gently it made me ache, like she was tucking in a child for the night. I folded my hands again, this time steadier. It felt like I'd given her more than paper. I'd handed her years, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid she'd mishandle it. She closed the lid. "I'll read them all tonight." I nodded, and somewhere inside me, something quiet, something small and long forgotten, began to believe again. The sun had started to dip by the time I stepped outside. The air smelled like lilacs and fresh grass. A soft breeze lifted my scarf, and for a second I thought I might cry again, but I didn't. I walked home with empty hands and a heart that felt seen. The sidewalk glowed gold in patches of sunlight and shadow. My feet moved slower, lighter, like the ground wasn't pulling quite as hard, and I thought to myself, maybe it doesn't matter who believes in you first. Maybe what matters is who sees you when you've forgotten how to look. I walked the rest of the way in silence, letting the breeze carry the peace I hadn't expected to find. I learned to hit send without crying. Told in a soft, first-person grandmother voice, with all 6 subheadings written to their exact word targets. Every Monday or Thursday, or sometimes both, my inbox would blink with a familiar line, "Thank you for your submission," always followed by some variation of no. I stopped reading the full emails after a while. Just opened, scanned, clicked, closed. I had a folder for them. Maybe someday. It started as hope. Then it became something else. A graveyard, maybe. A place where my voice went to sleep and never got asked to speak again. I'd whisper, "Maybe I'm not enough," while the fridge hummed behind me and the tea from last night still sat untouched beside the mouse pad. The mornings were quiet. The house is still asleep. But inside me, something noisy stirred, like a door swinging back and forth without ever closing. There was a morning, I can't say which one, where I hovered above the keyboard too long. The screen glowed blue, soft and cold, like it was waiting to see if I'd flinch. My hand trembled over the trackpad. The cursor blinked on the word submit. I didn't breathe. I just pressed it. Send. It clicked, and then my breath returned in pieces, slow and broken, like stepping down from a high place you didn't know you'd climbed. I stared at the screen, at the little message saying it was received, and I told myself, stop counting. But I always did. That was number 12, or maybe 13. I didn't write it down this time. I just turned off the screen and reached for my chipped mug. The tea was gone, just steam ghosts left behind. It came on a Wednesday. The subject line was plain, no caps, no exclamation, just your submission. I almost didn't click, but something in me, a muscle I thought had gone numb, twitched. And I opened it. We'd love to publish your story, it said, just like that. I blinked, read it again, then again. The word yes sat there like sunlight after weeks of cloud. I let my fingers hover above the reply button, not sure what I'd say. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I just stared at the screen and held the moment in my chest like a warm secret. Like maybe this time I was allowed to believe it. I sat at the table, both hands wrapped around my cup, like it was the only thing tethering me to the earth. The tea had gone lukewarm, but I didn't notice. I just sat and breathed and stared at nothing. The tears came quiet, just one. It slipped past my cheek and into the steam. It wasn't grief. It wasn't joy either. It was released. The kind that says, finally. He was in the next room reading the news. I could hear the faint crinkle of the pages and the occasional clearing of his throat. I looked toward the doorway. I could have told him. I almost did. But I didn't. Not yet. It felt too new, too small to share, like a robin guarding her egg, before the wind can find it. So I folded the moment and tucked it in the quiet between us. Some things are sacred in their silence. The next morning, I wrote again. Not because I had to, not because someone asked, but because I wanted to. The house was still sleeping. The shadows were long and soft, like they knew to tiptoe. I pulled on my cardigan and sat at the old desk by the window. My fingers found the keys like they'd been waiting. The space bar tapped gently, tick, tick, like footsteps in fresh snow. Outside, the wind moved through the trees, and inside, I moved through the memories. I didn't think so. I just wrote. Before the noise. Before the doubt stirred awake. And for those quiet minutes, the world listened. The porch swing creaked beneath me as I cradled a warm cup of chamomile, both hands wrapped around it like a prayer. The breeze smelled like honeysuckle and the garden hose someone left running down the road. I watched the fairy lights buzz gently above me. One flickered, then caught steady again. That was when the phone rang. At that hour, it was usually a wrong number or a robocall, and my thumb hovered over the decline button. But something in me, something older than instinct, paused. I brought the phone to my ear. Hello? My voice was softer than I meant it to be. And as I waited, I remember thinking, please be someone who sees me. His voice surprised me. Young, maybe mid-30s if I had to guess. But there was a calmness to it, like a teacher who waits for the room to quiet before speaking. Ma'am, he said, and I could tell he meant it, not like someone trying to sound polite, but like someone who had read every word I'd written. Your story is the most real thing I've read all year. That was all. No bells, no glitter. Just truth, plain and still. And yet, it landed heavier than anything I'd been told in a long, long time. I didn't know what to say, so I held the phone tighter and let the air hum around me. Somewhere in the woods, an owl hooted once. and, inside my chest, something very old and very tired stood up quietly. He started listing the titles, my titles. "We'd love to publish all 12 essays," he said. "Every single one of them. They belong together." I looked down at my lap. My tea was trembling just a little, rippling in the cup like it knew the weight of those words. I swallowed hard. "Under your name," he added softly, like it was something delicate. "My name." He said it like it mattered. I closed my eyes for a moment and let that part sink in. Every story, every piece, I wrote with a flickering lamp and hands that had cooked dinners, stitched hems, and held too much regret. All of it. Finally seen. The wind chimes stirred behind me, slow and sweet, like music written by memory. I didn't speak right away. I just let the moment glow. When I answered him, my voice came out steadier than I felt. "Yes," I said. It slipped out like something I had rehearsed in my sleep, but inside there was a tremble. Not fear, just wonder. I had waited so long to be enough for someone, and now, with one call, I was. Still, my chest whispered, "Are you sure? Are you ready?" But sometimes we say yes before the light reaches all the corners. Sometimes we have to. I tightened the blanket around my legs, trying to warm the part of me still frozen in doubt. The moon had risen just above the trees, its pale face watching. The porch was quiet, but my heart was not. The call ended, but I didn't move. I sat on that swing like the phone might ring again and say it was all a mistake, but it didn't. And still, my hands trembled, light and constant, like the breeze threading through summer grass. Not from fear, not from nerves, from relief, from recognition. I looked out at the yard, where the fireflies blinked in and out like shy applause. The porch light had dimmed by now, casting a soft halo around the swing. The scent of cut grass mingled with honeysuckle, wrapping around me like an old familiar shawl. I pressed the phone to my chest, just once, just to feel the echo, and I whispered, "Thank you." I didn't go inside right away. I stayed on the swing with my cup, watching the steam disappear into the night. It curled up into the stars, then vanished, slow and graceful, like the parts of me I used to hide. The sky was thick with stars, some dim, some bright, all holding their own stories. I thought about the younger versions of myself, the one who wrote between bedtime stories and bills, the one who folded her journal into laundry baskets, the one who stopped believing for a while. I held the cup tighter, not for warmth, but because it was real. And this was real. I whispered, "We did it, not to the air, but to all the women I had been." I stayed until the tea was long and cold, until the porch swing creaked no more, until the quiet felt like a promise instead of a punishment. And for the first time in years, I felt full. Not with tea, not with pride, but with possibility. We didn't plan the walk. We were just both in the house, quiet, restless. So we stepped out, not side by side like we used to, just near each other. His hands were in his pockets. Mine were folded tight around the strap of my bag. The sun was bright, one of those spring days that pretends to be summer. I could smell jasmine, blooming in the neighbor's yard, and the wind kept brushing loose hair across my face. I heard the birds. I heard the cars. I even heard his shoes scrape slightly against the sidewalk every few steps. But not his voice. Not yet. We walked like people who once knew how to speak, but had forgotten the language. Strangers in familiar clothes. And in that space between us, warmer than the sun, colder than forgiveness, I carried my silence like a shield. We turned the corner, and there it was. The bookstore on Main, the one where I used to buy crosswords and caramel mints. I slowed my steps, so did he, but not because of nostalgia. There, In the center of the window, propped on a wooden easel, was my book, my name, gilded lettering, in soft gold foil. Evelyn May Taylor. I froze. My heart knocked twice against my ribs, like it needed confirmation. There was no mistaking it. The cover I'd seen on a screen was now printed and public. Alive. He stopped too. Said nothing. Just stared. I didn't look at him. I couldn't. I just stared at the glass. At the name. At the version of myself I used to dream about but never quite believed in. For one suspended moment, time held its breath. He took a half-step closer. His brow furrowed, like he was trying to solve a riddle that didn't belong to him. His mouth opened slightly. "You used our stories," he said quietly, uncertain, almost like a question. I looked at the glass. Then I looked at him. "I used mine," I said, calm, steady, not cruel, just honest. He blinked, as if the words had landed where he didn't expect. I didn't explain, I didn't soften it. I had said it 1,000 times in my head. This time, it didn't come with shaking hands. Just breathe. The kind you exhale after a lifetime of holding it in. The wind pushed gently past us, flipping the corner of a flyer taped to the window. But neither of us moved. He didn't argue. For once, he didn't try to rewrite the moment. He didn't remind me of dinners he paid for or long hours at work. He didn't say, "Well, technically," or, "But I helped." He just stood there, mouth opening once, then closing again. And that silence, sharp, heavy, uncomfortably full, said more than any apology ever could. The breeze rustled the tree above us, scattering a few tiny blossoms onto the sidewalk. He looked down, then turned his head slightly, as if the sun had become too bright. But he didn't deny it. Not the words, not the window, not the name. That alone felt like the beginning of something unfamiliar. And I held it, gently, like a fragile truth finally given room to breathe. For a moment, I let myself feel it. Not defensively, not quietly, but fully. Pride. It sat in my chest, not loud, not brash, just there. I had written those words, in the quiet of dawn, in the ache of remembering, in the spaces no one thought to check. And now they lived here, in a shop window on Main, under a name no one could take away. But as I stood there, watching his face, something else slipped in. Guilt, not loud either. Just a tap on the shoulder. A whisper saying, he thought those stories belonged to him too. I didn't invite it. But it came anyway. Still, I didn't let it stay, because that pride, it had waited too long. I had earned it, with ink and silence, and stitched together nights. And for the first time, I didn't apologize for holding it. We didn't speak again as we walked, just kept moving. The sidewalk warms beneath our feet, the sun beginning its slow descent behind the buildings. His steps were quieter now. So were mine. We didn't bump arms, we didn't fall back into rhythm, but something had shifted. He didn't ask questions, and I didn't fill the air with explanations. The book stayed in that window, glowing faintly in the afternoon light, but a piece of me stayed there too, perched between fiction and fact, pain and paper. My story, not his, not ours, mine. We walked past a street musician strumming a tune I couldn't name. He tipped his head politely. I nodded back. And somewhere between that glass window and the parking lot, I realized the weight I'd been carrying was no longer mine to hold. I'd left it behind, between the covers, between the lines, between who I was and who I had finally chosen to be. The blouse was lavender. He always said it was too loud. Said it made me look like I wanted attention. Maybe I did, just not in the way he thought. I laid it flat across the bed, steam rising from the iron like a quiet exhale. Each pass over the fabric felt like pressing down memories, smoothing them out until they stopped wrinkling my courage. I dabbed a little lilac perfume on my wrist, the same bottle I used back when we still held hands in public. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from knowing. This wasn't just about clothes. It never was. Tonight, I wasn't dressed to be seen. I was dressing to be heard. I folded the pages carefully, 3 times, like I used to fold notes in high school, and slipped them into my purse, right between a roll of breath mints and an old photograph of my brother, edges soft from touching. The paper felt heavier than it should have, like it knew what it carried, like it remembered all the times it nearly ended up in the trash. I zipped the purse slowly, like sealing something sacred. As I walked down the street toward the hall, the wind picked up just enough to lift the hem of my coat. The streetlights blinked on above me, one by one, catching the gold in my hair that time hadn't managed to steal. I could almost hear him, saying, "Why dig up all that pain?" And maybe for a second I considered turning back, but I didn't. I walked faster. The inside of the community hall smelled like cinnamon tea and old wood, familiar, warm, the way stories should smell. Folding chairs lined the floor in uneven rows. Someone in the back offered me tea in a styrofoam cup. I took it. I didn't drink it. The heater hummed through the walls like an old lullaby. I found my seat near the front and rested my purse on my lap. My hands were warm around the tea, but my insides buzzed like a power line in the rain. I hadn't said these words aloud before. I had only written them in the dark, whispered them inside dreams I didn't think would live beyond my attic. And now, they were on paper, and that paper was about to breathe. The mic cord curled at the base of the stand like a question waiting to be asked. I waited quietly for my name to be called. When I stepped up to the podium, my knees didn't buckle. That surprised me. The spotlight wasn't blinding. It was soft, like a nightlight in a hallway you know too well. I unfolded the pages and held them gently, like they could still slip away. This piece, I began, was once considered too personal. A pause, then I read. Word by word, I told them about the miscarriage, about the doctor's silence, about the way I crocheted booties anyway. They were lemon yellow, soft yarn, small enough to fit in my palm. I never stopped making them, not even after the nursery went quiet. I read every word, slowly, not just for their ears, for their hearts, for the women in the room who had knitted their own grief and been told it was too much. As I read, I watched a woman in the second row clutch her sleeve a little tighter. She knew, and that was enough. When I said the last word, I folded the paper quietly. The room didn't erupt. It exhaled. A silence so thick it felt holy. Like church. No one moved, no one whispered. We just sat in it, together. Then a pair of hands clapped in the back, slow, careful. Then more, not thunderous, reverent, as if they were applauding the act of remembering, not the performance. I looked down at the paper, then at the mic. I hadn't performed. I had witnessed. I had told the truth and asked it to stand still long enough for someone else to recognize it. Chairs creaked as people leaned forward, and the heater behind. Me kept humming, now like a heartbeat that refused to hush. I stepped away from the mic and returned to my seat without looking up. I wasn't afraid anymore. I sat down and wrapped my hands around my purse like it might float away if I let go. No one said anything right away, and I was grateful. The quiet after applause is its own kind of peace. I glanced once toward the stage. The mic still stood there, tall and still, like it had witnessed something, too. Someone pressed a button, and soft music began to play over the speakers. People began to move, shuffle coats, and whisper again. But I stayed seated. My chest was tight, but not in a painful way. More like something had cracked open and didn't want to close. And then, in the hush between two breaths, a single tear slid down my cheek. Just one. Just enough. And in that moment, I knew the healing had finally begun. The alarm clock ticks soft and steady beside my bed, like a heart I no longer need to check. I still wake before dawn, not because I have to, just because something in me remembers how. I pull on my sweater, worn at the elbows, soft as memory, and shuffle to the window. I don't turn on the overhead light, just the lamp, warm, golden, enough to write by. My pen is always there, resting on the edge of my notebook like it never left. I sit, and I write. I don't wait for applause. I don't wait for perfection. I write because somewhere, someone might be listening quietly. Someone who still cries in the kitchen when no one's awake. Someone who thinks they're too old to start over. Someone who's been told their story doesn't matter. I write for her, and I write for the me who once believed them. I found it one evening. I was making the bed, straightening pillows, smoothing the sheet on his side. That's when I saw it, my book, resting there on his nightstand, spine creased gently, bookmark tucked at chapter 5. No sticky notes, no edits, just read. The lamp beside it was still warm. I stood there a moment, not sure what I felt. He never apologized, never said the words, but he had turned the pages, and that pause, that private, unannounced act felt like enough, like something mended without ceremony. I walked out of the room without touching it. Just let it be. His silence didn't sting anymore, not that night. They come in spurts, envelopes with shaky handwriting, ink that pools in certain loops, stamps from places I've never been. Some are short, just a thank you. Some stretch over pages, stories about loss, about love, about finally feeling seen. They write in blue marker, in pencil, in shaky cursive I have to hold to the light to read. I keep them in a shoebox under the bed, tied with a ribbon now, because there are too many to stay loose. I read them sometimes when the house is quiet, usually after midnight. They're proof that my words found their way, that even when I thought I was writing alone, I never really was. And every envelope, every return address, is a reminder that our stories go further than we ever expect. I stopped by the library last week just to drop off a book. But when I rounded the corner near the end cap, there it was, mine, right below the staff pick sign. My name on the cover, the pages slightly bent from being held. Joyce was behind the desk. She gave me a smile, then nodded toward the display. "Look inside," she mouthed. I did. Tucked in the front cover was a note, "Still changing lives. Jay." I didn't cry. I just stood there a moment, heart fluttering like a bird too proud to perch. I felt like a visitor to my own story, one that had found its way without needing to shout. I smiled quietly, like I'd finally understood the secret I had been writing toward all along. I used to write like I was afraid of being overheard. Small letters, tiny margins, scribbled and hidden. Now, my pen moves wide across the page. Bold, slow, unapologetic. I don't cross out as much. I don't whisper when I write. I tell it plainly, what hurt, what healed, what still lingers in the bones. I don't worry if it's poetic. I don't try to make it pretty. I try to make it true. Because I've learned that truth doesn't need decoration. It just needs air. I sit at my desk, the lamp casting a warm circle of light, and let the silence hold me like a friend. I write, not to explain myself, but to exist fully. And that now is more than enough. This is what I've come to believe. Say it. Even if your voice shakes, even if the words are still finding their rhythm, write the story, tell the truth, not for revenge, not for applause, just so no one else can twist it into something it never was. The world will always try to sell your silence, package it, profit from it. But your voice, your lived, messy, beautiful voice, belongs only to you. And when you use it, it changes things. I sit at my desk now, deep in the hush of night. The wind taps gently against the window like applause from the past. My book rests nearby, worn at the edges, loved. And in that quiet circle of lamplight, I know the truth. The most powerful thing I ever did was speak. If any part of my journey reminded you of something you've carried quietly, I'd be honored to hear it. I still write before the sun rises, hoping someone like you might be out there listening. If you'd like to walk with me again, you're always welcome to subscribe.